What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination, where everything you think is real. Look, I have a really important episode for you today that I really need you guys to pay attention to. Today, I'm bringing on two of my very dear friends and two people that I think have extremely important voices, the Oldachs. So we have Rye, who's an immigrant from South Korea, who's married to Jamison, who I call Jamie. So you'll hear me use both during the interview. And he is a 7-year Air Force combat vet. This is just touching the iceberg of their incredible resumes and stories. And I wanted to bring them on because what's going on in the world today, here in America especially, is something that a lot of people I think are taking for granted and not fully understanding the repercussions of some of the actions that are happening. And so I wanted to bring them on because they have incredible stories about living and experiencing places that are more oppressed than America and that have been subjected to communism, socialism, and a lot of things that here in America we're not even really aware all the time that exist in other places because we're so privileged here in our country. So without further ado, welcome Rye and Jamison. I appreciate you guys coming on today. How are you doing?
Oh,
Doing
great.
great. How are you?
We're happy to be here.
All things considering, good. It's just a strange week, but I think it's really important that we share your story with people. So, Rye, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your story and background, and same with you, Jamie. And we'll kind of get into your actual story and how you made it to America and how you met Jamie and some of your experiences.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. So I like Emma said, I am an immigrant from South Korea, and I immigrated here after I married Jameson. We met in Korea, and I immigrated here in 2015.
Yeah.
Was it? Okay, so the fall of 2015. So I was kind of um, you know, I parachuted down to the states where the whole election campaigns they're all happening at the time, and I was like a blank page. I have no idea what was happening. But anyway, I'll talk about that in a little bit. But a little bit of my background: I am a Korean citizen, but when I was 12, 13, I moved to Canada, and that's where I did my high school and college. I had lived there, worked there, and then I moved back to Korea where my parents were, and I started working for a Catholic humanitarian organization that helps North Korea, and then I worked for different foreign embassies there. And the reason I'm bringing these up is that um, growing up until like a few years ago, I was not, in fact, a conservative, or I didn't even know that such thing existed because I was not interested in politics at all. I wasn't particularly a news watcher either. Like I wasn't interested in what was happening at all. Like I was that really silly, ignorant girl who, watches friends drink wine and watch like Sex in the City. Like, very like that demographic. But when I moved to the States with my husband, and after like, after we moved, he deployed right away. Let me know if I'm like going too long or something.
No, you're good.
Pretty
Tell
good.
your story, girl. You have an
Okay.
incredible resume, so I'd love for you to share it.
So while he was gone, I had a lot of time on my hands. I was trying to look for a job and stuff like that, but I still, we didn't have kids yet, um, so I ended up, watching a lot of TV, and I thought that I was educating myself on, the elections and who's running and stuff, and I like I just didn't like Trump, and I was automatic like I just didn't have a good impression of him, and I was very like I just automatically had kind of like enamored with like Obama and like Clinton, and that like they had an amazing marketing team, you know what I mean, like let's be honest. So I fell for that, I fell for it, and I but so what really got me open my eyes was that I started researching stuff about the issues of abortion and feminism, because those were hot election topics, and that's something that media talked about all the time, and I didn't know why that was an election issue. So I decided to do my own research, and for some reason, by the grace of God, I think it just led me to the Bible, and I started reading up on it, and I realized at that moment I was given a choice. I was given a choice to keep believing in what I was believing in before, this man-made science theory that fetuses are not human, these tiny tiny beings are not human, and all of a sudden they come out of a woman's body and they're human then. Or you could believe that everyone is a creation of God as soon as they're conceived. And literally when I was given that choice, I had to choose God, right? So that really changed my mindset. And from there, I looked back on my life. I realized that I was a de facto leftist, not even realizing that I was. Because growing up in Canada, and I remember in college one time, and what's her name? Ann Coulter?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ann Coulter was speaking at a university nearby, and there was a protest against her. So they had to cancel the whole event. And even when I heard that, like, I didn't think anything of it. I thought, okay, well, she must be a really terrible person that people don't want her here. I never went beyond that. But I had realized how, like, everything I had learned at school and from the media kind of shaped how I thought. And I was never given another choice to be able to compare and choose for myself what kind of worldview that I was going to look at the world through. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so it's like it seems in America and Western culture, just how much what we're exposed to in our university environments and mainstream media. If you don't take the time to really think for yourself, do the research for yourself of what your school of thought is, the default is leftism, which is essentially socialism, borderline communism at this point. And it's just pretty sad.
Yeah. And then so once I realized that, I was very surprised because, like I said, I wasn't a political person. I didn't really know anything about it, but I was already, I guess, conditioned to think certain ways and agree with what the media was saying on TV. It'd be like little snippets that I would watch here and there, or you watch shows, and those ideas were like subconsciously planted in my head, and I didn't even know that was happening. Yeah. So I woke up very abruptly, and Jamie knows this.
Oh, it was a rough time.
Mimi, talk a little bit too. I'd love for you to share a little bit about your experiences, because you obviously also, you have different worldviews, almost the opposite of Rye. Like, you were born here and then moved to other countries and have lived elsewhere as an adult, where Rye almost has the complete opposite. So I'd love to kind of compare and contrast how you grew up, your worldviews, and like kind of what being around the world helped open your eyes to.
Yeah. So I grew up in a small town in western Pennsylvania, as you know, Emma, and the default there was conservative, borderline like Confederacy. I remember at our prom there was a whole group of people who wore camo tuxedos. It was a really good time. Drove their big ass trucks to where we were going, all that fun stuff. Um, and 9/11 really hit home for everybody in our school. So many people in our class enlisted, and just across the board. So patriotism was really huge. And so I never watched the news growing up either or anything like that. I just knew I really wanted to join the military and go be a badass and whatnot. So
Was that 9/11, or did you have aspirations before that to join military?
So my grandfather on my mother's side, he was a retired full-bird colonel in the army, and I remember when I was really young, fourth grade. That summer, he took me and my brothers up to West Point, United States Military Academy, because he had been stationed there as a doctor for a couple years, and he loved it. So he wanted us to see it, and when he took us there, I was just so enamored by everything. And from that point on, I was obsessed with it, and it's what I wanted. I mean, I was in fourth grade, and I had determined what my future was going to be. And I just looked at everything through that soda straw perspective, and there was nothing else that mattered. So I spent the rest of my life just trying to achieve that goal, which I ultimately did, just through a lot of like weird ways. Because graduated high school, I went to a prep school for West Point. After that year, I went to West Point for a year. I quit West Point. I went to Penn State for 3 years, and then got my degree, and then decided to go into the military after that. I wanted to be a special operator. You couldn't go be a special operator as an officer right from enlisting, so I came in as an engineer and cross-trained right away. My specialty in the Air Force was controlling close air support strikes for the Army, Marines, Rangers. It was a really fun job. I got to do a lot of operational planning, strategic planning, tactical planning in very austere environments. I got to see a lot of really cool shit. I deployed to Afghanistan, 2 years in Korea. From Korea, I got to travel all around Asia, training Korean Special Forces, Japanese Special Forces, Malaysian Special Forces, trained Philippine Special Forces as well. All in how to do close air support strikes and how to control aircraft from the ground perspective. So it's just a very dynamic career, I guess. I got to see how our military and our government foreign policy operates in multiple theaters across the world. I had that Pacific experience. I had this Central Command experience in the Middle East, and how that foreign policy was executed there, which we can talk more details about that later if you'd like, because I was deployed underneath the Obama administration, where the rules of engagements were incredibly stringent. So I had a deployment to Eastern Europe as well. So all of our foreign policy is just, it's different in all those theaters. So I got to see it across the board, and how it impacts. And, I lived among all those people, worked really closely with those foreign militaries, got to hear about their perspectives on different things, socialism, and how they view America, and that as well. I ended up getting out off of active duty in 2018. And I came out to, I'm here in Los Angeles, and I now work for the Space Force as a civilian, and I write strategic documents for them. Yeah, I get to look at space strategy, and China is a super hot topic. Communism is a very hot topic in that world. So yeah, we can really hit that.
It is. Now, one thing I want to kind of drive home with people, having been outside the United States, most people that live here don't get the opportunity to leave, or if they do, it's more just to go visit. And so, they visit tourism spots, and it's not really embedded in a culture where people can actually understand how outside countries and people look at the United States. From your opinions, both of you living in different places, what do other countries and other people think of when they think of the United States?
I'll go first. So the analogy that's been given to me by locals in Afghanistan was, hey, that movie Star Wars? They were telling me about. They're like, so we view you as the Empire, and we're the Rebel Alliance. Like the Taliban's the Rebel Alliance, and we're the Empire. Another good analogy is Hunger Games, which I've been using that a lot lately. I'm sure everybody's seen that. The United States is the capital, and the rest of the world is the districts that are serving the capital. That's the way the rest of the world views the United States. They really don't want them involved in everything that they have going on, and yet we're there forcing ourselves on them continuously. There's not a whole lot of people that actually want us, like military-wise, where we're at. No matter what the media is telling you or the politicians are telling you, like I've been there, talked with the locals, it's the opposite of that. the thing that really changes their minds a lot is when they meet the soldiers that come over, because the soldiers, us troops, we're pretty naive, I guess. We're incredibly naive, and we believe our own country's propaganda of, we're a global force for good. We're spreading democracy and saving these savages, if you will, call them that. That's a rough term for that, but we generally believe that, and we want to help them. And when the locals see that we actually believe that, it does change their perspective a little bit. But at the end of the day, they know that we're being ordered there. We're being ordered there by just our masters, at the Pentagon and on Capitol Hill, are so far removed from the fight. And the core reasons for a lot of the times that we go to these places to fight is not what's being portrayed in the media, and it's really for control over resources, because that's why you go to war. That's why you expand.
Explain that a little bit more. Which resources?
It depends on the theater you're in, right? But I mean, I think it's at this point it's pretty common knowledge that we're in the Middle East for oil, primarily the Iraq-Syria fight. There's the Iraqi war, essentially, like Saddam Hussein, yeah, he's a terrible person. He was doing really bad shit to his people. But the primary reason why we went there was because he was trying to get off of the petrodollar and get on the dinar dollar. That's their currency? I don't know. So he was trying to make it so that other countries could purchase oil in Iraqi currency versus having to purchase oil in US dollars, which is how it is right now. That was the primary motivation for us going there, and that's not what was portrayed in the media or what people know, common knowledge-wise. In Afghanistan, I'm pretty sure the the primary reason we're there is the cash crop that's coming out of that country, which is the poppy industry and control of that, because the majority of the world's supply of heroin is coming out of Afghanistan still to this day, and we've been there for 20 years. So
Wow.
wild.
And then, Rye, from your perspective, being an immigrant, the waiting list here for immigration in America to become an American citizen is so long, as you know, and I'm sure your process going through everything was a lot more difficult probably than you even anticipated. Why is that waiting list so large? How do people, in your perspective, look at coming to America, and what is that from an immigration perspective, moving to this country, and how people outside of our country view it, that we might take it, for granted living here?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, my immigration process was probably the easiest process, because I was married to a serviceman. So you get a priority processing. But still, like, I waited almost 2 years until I got the PR. I got a PR card.
The green card, yeah.
The green card.
Yeah.
Um, but it takes long because everyone wants to come here, right? And in Korea, when I wasn't awake, I thought Korea was the best country in the world, because you go there and it's really fun. Like, I mean, it's not on the surface. A lot of countries that I've been to, even Canada, right? I grew up in Canada, and these countries, when you're living in it without I guess, the discernment, you don't know what you're living, and you're happy in there, in that environment.
Because you haven't experienced anything else. You
Yeah,
just
you
don't know
haven't
anything else.
experienced
You don't know anything
anything else.
different, right?
No, and there is nobody oppressing my freedom because I wasn't dissenting to anybody, right? Like, I wasn't voicing any opinion that's different than the main narrative, right? So most people living in that bubble have no idea that, actually, South Korea is also very like, like, it is oppressive, but it's not like, out in the open. It's coming out now, just like how it is in the States. And I, before I thought that it was like most free country in the world, and I thought that it was great that we didn't have guns because that kept people safe. And boy, I was wrong. But anyway, but what I wanted to say is that um, you just like people are being conditioned every day by their media, by the shows that they watch, by the entertainment that they do. Everything pushes some kind of narrative, and when you grew up in it, you just don't know anything different. Yeah, and for the immigration question, um, people come here because in Korea, for example, although it appears a free country, like there isn't much, uh, I guess, like possibility of success unless you're from a rich family. Like you have to be from a connected family already. So it's really hard for Koreans to break through their socioeconomic class, right? Unlike in America, you can go try anything, right? Still needs hard work and persistence. But with that, you can go and make your money, achieve some things. And what I hadn't seen in South Korea particularly was that you don't have that opportunity. At least it's not as free as it is here. And I don't think people, even a lot of Koreans, don't actually realize that.
What types of things are, I don't want to say restricted necessarily, because it's not something you might be aware of that's happening, but looking over at kind of big picture, what are some like big differences on how life is in a country like Korea or another country that's, oppressed in a different way, maybe without even realizing it, and things aren't horrible, but it's still this, level of oppression, almost like a cloud that sits over everybody.
Mm-hmm.
What are kind of some key differences? Like, are you not allowed to start a business there? Or how does that work to why can't people penetrate that, even though these powerful families are the ones that end up making the success and having and holding the power over the country?
Yeah, like I think what it is that it's such a small country, and the focus on like education puts people at a competition with each other. So is as a country, it's not a society where it fosters creativity and just unique individuality. They want you to go to school, go to the get the best score for the SAT, go to the best school, and then you go work for the most prominent conglomerate. What? I forget how to say that. Like one of those big companies, right? Like Samsung or
Major corporations.
yeah, major corporations. And that's how people view as success. And so it's not necessarily that it's hard to start a business, but in order for somebody to start a business, there's things that have to kind of align. You have to be able to have that headspace and the mindset to start a business. But the whole country, like first of all, like they have this system where everybody consumes the same type of search engine, media, like K-pop, K-drama. So you're like pushed this, I guess like a conformed content, and I mean that's probably one of the reasons why I always thought the in order to like be successful, like I had to graduate from university and work for like one of the major corporations, like one of the big name ones. Otherwise, it's not a success.
So explain to her how, like, so here in America, there's a lot of diversified companies, right? Because there's a large small business community. But in Korea, that really doesn't exist. There's like LG and Samsung, and that's it. And they're in like every industry imaginable over there.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah. So there are only like maybe few companies that have dominated, pretty much playing monopoly on like a lot of industries there. So Samsung has a lot of um, they have the phones, they have like electronics, and they're such a huge part of the Korean, like typical Korean life. And in order for even like an entrepreneur to start a business, rather than relying on your creativity and like what market uh, demands, using your creativity, they tend to like build a company that works for Samsung. So like Samsung will, it's such a huge company, so they contract out a lot of their work, and then you just kind of work as a contractor kind of thing. So I think it's just like this is such a like a I feel like a big topic, because it's not just that there is some kind of regulation that make people not discouraging starting a business. Is nothing like that. And the government always says, small businesses are the backbone of this country, and they encourage businesses. But when it comes down to it, the whole culture is, you're just expected to be conformed and not really step out of the line, and you're not encouraged to take risks, so and then I think that's something that I really saw when I got to the States, and when I got out of my own head. Because when I first got here, I had believed in the whole lies of, minority woman, you're not going to be successful because there are people who don't want you to be successful.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was in a.
I remember when she was applying to jobs in 2015 when we first got here, got back to Texas, and I was about to deploy. Pretty much had enough time to get her an apartment, a car, driver's license, teach her how to drive because she didn't know how to drive, and then I left.
Wow.
But before I left, I was like, hey, try to get a job, while I'm in Afghanistan. That'd be great. But I remember talking to her on the phone, and she was convinced. She would tell me all the time she was convinced the reason why she wasn't getting interviews was because because she had to write her legal name on all of her applications, which was Hwayoung, and she was convinced that the assumption was that she didn't speak English and she wasn't U.S. educated, so nobody wanted to hire her.
Yeah, yeah. I had believed
completely
that.
Convinced.
Yeah, and that actually like led me into a severe depression.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Is there more oppression for women in Korea to have created that belief than here in America? I think that's something else too that we don't always understand living in this country, is just kind of the difference between men and women in different cultures versus here, and also understanding how that can influence people who move here and how they perceive how we might operate here, which could be different from where they're from.
Um. Yeah. Like I mean, in Korea, like I wouldn't say women specifically are oppressed by men or anything like that. Um. But I think Korea as a whole is culturally oppressed, right?
Well, women get
But
paid a lot less in Korea.
I mean, that is true.
Yeah.
That is true.
Salaries across the board are way less in
Yes.
Korea,
Right?
but the
Like more
prices for
noticeable than here in America.
yeah, yes, way more noticeable, and the
Yeah.
prices for commodities are about the same. So
Okay.
it sucks.
Yeah. And but then like I mean, it's really like I don't want to say a blanket statement just because it's actually a very confusing time right now, because um in Korea, so one thing about Korea that I realized is that Korea is almost like a testing ground for whatever movement that CCP wants to deploy. They kind of try it in Korea and see how it goes.
Hmm.
Because Korea is a very kind of like a bubble society.
Is it South Korea, or do they do it all throughout both?
I'm talking about South Korea. I actually don't know what's going on in North Korea,
Yeah,
like
nobody
all
does.
that much, because what's going on in North Korea is not something that the media talks about in South Korea. Like
Interesting.
people actually don't know much about it. Um, and oh God, I lost track of thought.
You were talking about how the CCP uses Korea a lot of times, kind of.
Oh yes, yeah. So before that Me Too started it in Korea, and like side how it went, and it was successful. So they kept bringing in, like, I mean, 5G started in Korea already, and they actually were successful in impeaching a conservative and the first female president of South Korea. And then now we have this very China friendly, um, you know,
Yeah, and
liberal president.
former President Park, who's the one who was impeached, she's in jail still. She's still in prison.
She's still in prison. And
Was it parallel, similar to what's happening here, or was that something that was justified?
it was not
It was
justified.
it was
And the
yes.
thing is, we are now seeing the evidence of how it was all fabricated. And there was a huge protest against the president park. And now evidence is coming out because they have been suppressed, right? Now evidence is coming out on, like, not enough to really red pill the mass, but on Twitter and stuff like that, some Koreans are talking about how the whole protest, the candle vigil thing, was widely, like, reported all around the world because it was such a peaceful protest. But at the same time, we're finding evidence that there were, like, Chinese agents who are pretending to be the Korean protesters. The Chinese students that were studying in Korea, they were called to participate in the rally and stuff like that, and spread, and what you call it, like, so, and then pretend to be Koreans in, like, comments, right, and just instigate stuff and whatnot. And I see a lot of parallel happening here, even on Twitter. There are a lot of people who are, I mean, they're genuine Americans who believe the leftist ideals, but I do believe that there are a lot of operatives. Because, I mean, for China, all they have is they have a lot of people, they have a lot of manpower, they can actually go out and do this. you know? So, yeah, I've seen a lot of parallel between the two countries, how the CCP operates, and that has made me kind of open my eyes and, like, wow, like, this is nothing new in the States. It's nothing new. They've done this several times, not just in Korea, but countries in Africa, um, to take their resources and all that stuff. And they're now brazen enough to try at this level in the States because they've been practicing for
So
many
really what
years.
you're saying is a lot of things here that we're experiencing that we think are just central to our country and only happening here. These are things that have been practiced in other countries to find what works and maybe what doesn't in order to have a successful operation here in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, basically.
which is why I think is why we're seeing rallies across the globe in major cities in Taiwan, in Japan, in Hong Kong, all supporting. They're all pro America, all pro Trump, supporting him, and anti CCP rallies where they're waving American flags and trying to exhibit their support because they've been experiencing CCP propaganda and the CCP tactics for many, many years before it has come to brazenly hit our shores. And
But unable to do anything about it.
yeah,
Really.
but they've been completely unable to do anything about it because there's tiny countries, and China is massive.
And if you already have the government who's pro-China, they are going to suppress any dissenting voices, right?
Yeah.
So it's almost like the world is waiting for um, America to investigate the election fraud and all that stuff. So that kind of makes it like whatever happens here, like, cascades and trickles down to the rest of the world, pretty much. So once it gets proved here, other countries can prove that CCP or other, parties use the same tactics to manipulate their elections. So that's why people have so much hope that it gets exposed. It just needs to get exposed for not just for the
Yeah.
States. It's the matter of, like, a global
Yeah. Because if we fall here, it
Integrity.
doesn't get highlighted here and stopped here. Like that's it.
That's it.
We're the last line of defense as Americans. Because think about, if America becomes socialist, communist, what countries are going to take American refugees? Where are we going to go? There's nowhere to go. This is it.
Yeah,
So
this is it. Yeah,
it's
CCP is everywhere, and there's nowhere to go.
it's time for all of us to wake up and all of us to really start contributing. Um, which I know Emma, you and I had talked when we had met a few weeks ago. How like I wasn't vocal on social media at all, and for a purpose. I've got an active TS clearance that I use to feed my family. And I know there's been others I've worked with who were vocal about their political opinions, about their anti-China, all that, and they no longer have jobs working for the U.S. government because the U.S. government in the bureaucratic sector, well, in the DoD, anyways. I'm sorry. The bigger bureaucracies outside of the DoD, they tend to cater towards leftists, but in the DoD, they don't want people who have strong political opinions. They want people to be neutral. They want people to be neutral, and that's a good thing. Is for a reason because of like look at the current tensions, right? Where we basically have two presidents right now. So the DoD is the one organization that has to keep a level head at all times. That's why they want that. So.
Now, from your experience, Jamie, you have experienced, I mean, you were in Afghanistan, you've been in some really interesting places to experience cultures that are even different than South Korea, America. What do you notice about some of the differences, especially, Afghanistan, they experience a lot different levels of oppression than a lot of countries do. What types of things have you seen that you're starting to see parallel here, or what are some things that we can look for as far as patterns to help people understand what we're beginning to dip our feet into here in America?
Hmm. That's an interesting question. So I haven't lived in really much socialist areas. Um, so Afghanistan it's all tribal. There's no central government. There is one, but it's a puppet government that we control. The NATO forces control. But it's all these dozens, almost hundreds of different tribes that it's almost you think about how Native America was before the Europeans ever showed up with Native Americans, just all these warring tribes, just murdering and destroying each other constantly. That's pretty much Afghanistan. Not all of them are wars and violent, but they have a propensity for it there. As far as parallels here to the states, tribalism is extreme tribalism is it's bad. It's terrible. It destroys countries. I mean, look at what it did to Afghanistan. Afghanistan's been in a constant state of war since Alexander the Great, pretty much. I think he was like the only leader that was ever able to actually conquer Afghanistan, or at least that region, which is just wild to really think of. But so here in the States, what's going on right now is we're beginning to polarize into this tribalism mentality, and war with each other essentially, which would borderline fracture the union. Um, and we're the closest to pre-Civil War tensions that we've ever been since the Civil War right now, in my opinion. Um, and so I would just tell everybody to be cognizant of that, and just be aware of it. It's one of those things I think that it's you shine a light on it, you can't unsee and realize that you're doing it. But a lot of people are subconsciously doing it, and
What are they subconsciously doing? So give a big picture of what's happening here and what this is setting us up for.
so we're separating ourselves into these only group think. We're only surrounding ourselves with people who think like us, and that's it. And we're putting ourselves in these echo chambers where we're just constantly gratifying our own opinions over and over and over again, and it's just reinforcing our ideology and our ideas. Period. Dot. And that's it. And I think like you, us, we observe. I observe like across the spectrum. I want to see it all, and discern for myself what it is. But if you're not consciously doing that and making an effort to actually think about doing that, then your default is to only seek out people who think like you do, and only to reinforce the ideals that you already have, because it's easy that way, right? It's the path of least resistance, and humans naturally don't want to, they avoid the resistance, they avoid conflict by nature, so they don't want to seek out these opposite opinions and understand the way that others think. But it's a foundational principle of America and what makes us as great of a country as we are, because we're able to combine so many different ideologies and viewpoints and form them into a greater purpose, and have this synergistic effect of these different tribalist ideologies coming together for the greater purpose of the country. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I mean, for if it was like tribalism based on different ideologies, I think that sounds a little bit better than how we are being grouped right now by the media, and especially the media, I guess, because they're trying to put people into these groups based on our superficial traits, based on our skin color, based on our what kind of genitals you have, and they're pitting us against each other, and that's I think that's like, or your sexuality and things like that, and those are not what makes a person a person. You're so much more than your skin color. You're so much more than your gender or sexuality. But we're being conditioned, and even every second being validated with that bias, that if you're gay, you have to think like this. If you're black, you have to think like that. If you're straight, like, you're not a good person, or like, whatever those things that those stereotypes, we should say, have been manufactured, really. And I think that's a really dangerous road to, like you said, it's just going to fracture the country. And it's not, we have to celebrate the diversity of thought, not diversity of necessarily skin color. I mean, that's great as long as the skin color is bringing in different cultures, and we are being able to enjoy each other's cultures. But now we have this like a one culture kind of thing, and if you don't accept it, you're canceled, pretty much.
I think your point of diversity of thought is important to hit on, because that's what's in, like, any like high performing team. You want diversity of thought in there, because it's just looking at a problem set from as many different angles as possible, essentially.
Yeah, and then where do they come from? Because we're all different people, right? We experience life different ways, and it's not because I'm Asian that I had a particular experience. Like, I mean, some of it may have to do with it because I grew up in an Asian culture, but I just think that there's way too much emphasis on skin color and your gender, and somehow people are against you because of that. That I had that mindset before, and it didn't serve me, and it's a lie. And I think, like, people should think about what they're sowing into, really, because the fruit of that belief that I was a victim of this racism filled and discrimination filled world was just pretty much self-loathing and depression. And when I got to change that mindset and view myself in a different way, that I'm a unique person, I'm a creation of God, that I literally, like, my depression was literally cured overnight. Right? Remember?
Yeah.
I threw away my antidepressant pills that night.
She cold turkey went off antidepressants, which
I mean,
is, like, not recommended.
Yeah,
not recommended, but it worked for you, which is amazing.
It did work for me.
amazing what, just that thought process can do for our self-esteem. And I think one thing I've really noticed, especially the last few years, I would say, ever since this last presidency, seems like the news, we all know that, well, not everybody, but I think it's becoming more well known that news isn't necessarily truth. Truth is embedded in it, but it's a lot of storytelling to elicit a response from the public. And news before used to be, even if it was biased, it would be a little bit neutral as far as opinions being shouted. They would deliver stories maybe, and it would be in such a way that it was very believable almost, and very clean cut. And I've noticed over these last 4 years, there's been a lot more bashing of people. If you're on one side, the goal of the news story is to throw the other person under the bus and throw as many punches as you can, and be mean and be crude. And then you hear it from the other side, and then you even hear it from neutral sources. It's almost become this word war. When you look at like World War III, if you take out the L, word war three, and I feel like kind of that's what we're experiencing a little bit. And so I feel too that what we're seeing a lot of are people who are being conditioned over time to think that that's how you address people. When you experience something different from them, you bash them. And so I'm noticing that on social media. I'm seeing, like how you guys said, that diversion of thought. When somebody comes across somebody who thinks differently, their reaction is to bash that person and to slam them down instead of saying, "Oh my gosh, I've never heard of that. Can you talk to me
Yeah.
about that more?" Or, "I'm going to go research that. Good idea." Or, let's talk about that. It's all of a sudden this like war between people with words. Are you guys noticing that too? And living in different places, how does our news, parallel and relate similarly or different than news in other cultures?
You
Um,
want me to go?
sure.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Sure. Okay. So I'm just gonna do it from the perspective of because I got to talk about this specific topic with a lot of different members of foreign military forces. Granted, people who join the military globally are generally more conservative in their school of thought, but what they would tell me is, yeah, so there was a guy from he was a Czech Republic Special Forces EOD technician. He's a chief master sergeant equivalent. So he's really high ranking enlisted person, right? Real down to earth guy, but he grew up in Soviet Soviet Czech, right? He grew up in the Soviet Union, so he remembers as a child being indoctrinated with propaganda, what that news like felt like, and what it that just that tone and the emotional response that they were trying to get out of you. Like he vividly remembers it because they had to break an entire generation of that essential propaganda, mind control, and school of thought in order to have a successful country that they have now. And so we were in Afghanistan, and when we're in Afghanistan, they only play they call it the Armed Forces Network, I think is what it was. But so they read the news, and it's military people who are reading the news. But he looked at me one day and he's like, "Do you not realize that this is propaganda? Because it's always only talking about like all this amazing things that the U.S. military is doing for the world and for all these different countries and stuff like that. That's the only spin that is. So it was either that was on or CNN, right? And he would always look at me and be like, like, this is propaganda. Everybody in my country knows that this is propaganda. Like, how do the people in your country don't?" Because he was talking to a group of us, and everybody looked at him, like he was just off his rocker. But I mean, that's just somebody who grew up in communism. He can recognize it, and I think what you said is like over the last 4 years, how you've been seeing a lot more of it. It's been it's gone exponential. It's gone parabolic. It's just a complete E curve on how it was over the last compared to the last 20 years. It was like a gradual increase, and the last 4 years they just really it's out of control. And if you're not awake to it or aware of it, or that it is actual propaganda, then it does have an effect on you. And like you said, social media, it's the worst on there, and people hear a different school of thought, and instead of trying to understand the way that person thinks, they take offense to it. Like it's an attack on their belief system, an attack on them. So they respond in defense and attack. And all that does is just build on each other and bubbles to this point of potential civil war that we're at right now. Um, that's all I've got. What do you have on that topic?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And also, I think it is really reflective of how our children and even us have been raised in this country. You know, we've been conditioned to trust the authority and just go do whatever they say, whatever they are saying is official. And we're conditioned not to trust each other. You know, when like people are perfectly fine believing whatever the government or the media says that has these, logos and, the familiar faces in suits. But when another person, on the internet tells you something, it's automatically like, what, like, is an attack. Although that person has nothing to gain, from telling you something. You know what I mean? It doesn't have even have to be a true or not. But usually, you know, the news stations have something to gain, right? They have the power to control the narrative, and they that are advertising dollars and are on the line, and they want to report the news as, I guess, outrageous as it possible so that they get those eyeballs for advertisers and all that stuff. Um, so yeah, I think like all what's going on is really a symptom of like a core issue. And core issue is that I think that people want to belong somewhere, and the easiest groups to find is like I said, the groups that are being preached to us. Like you have to unite, um, under like me against the racists, me against the white supremacists, and me against the straight people, me against the shits. Um, and they find these groups, and they truly feel belong, right? And um, so for them, it becomes their identity. And if somebody attacks your identity, you're going to get super triggered.
Yeah.
And that's for everyone. That's not just for the leftists. That's just being a human. Because we're always looking for an identity. If you're not, growing up, some people go to daycare as soon as, 3 months into they're born. And then they go into kindergarten, they go into school and do all this education. And all of a sudden they are thrown into the world. Okay, you're an adult, you know, do adult things. And they were never even given a chance to really like even think about who they are, you know, find out what they like and what they're passionate about. And we're just given these scientific theories that we come from monkeys. Well, if you tell people that you come from monkeys, they're gonna act like monkeys. Like they because what is the reason for really striving to be better, or um, having a higher purpose when we are just part of this giant machine called evolution, and we're just living in this time momentarily, and then when you're gone, you're gone. Nothing really matters. You know what I mean? So
Is education, I know you didn't go to school here necessarily, but you're familiar after living here kind of with the school of thought of America. Is school taught very similarly in your country where you're from too? And then Jamie, also, like, what do you see as far as, you know, the indoctrination process before becoming an adult? Is that similar all over the world, or is it different in different ways compared to America?
I mean, for me, I got schooling in Korea as well as Canada, and I don't have. So I think it's just the basic, uh, you know, fact is that the winners get to write the history. from their perspective, right? And that's been happening everywhere. And depending on the government, if they're pro-China, for example, in Korea, we have this pro-China government right now, and they are actually like revising the history, and they're like omitting certain part that highlights China in a bad light, or like they're manipulating the truth. I mean, not the truth, what happened, right? Because really, what happened can be interpreted by people in different ways, you know? And every one of those things can be a truth to somebody because you're looking at something and you have a thought that's just as valid as someone else's. But the thing is, like, we never get to hear um, any other side, you know? You can look at an event and we can say, okay, like there's a school of thought that thinks this happened, and then there's another school of thought that this happened. At least like two choices. But no, like we always hear what happened, who was the bad people, who was the good people, and then what was the result of that. And when I woke up, I realized most of the history that I learned isn't necessarily the truth. It may have a part of truth to it, as a historical, like what happened, but we are given the interpretation of what happened as a fact and never given any other choices to look at, any other options to look at. I think that was pretty much the same across the board, in Korea and Canada, even in, yeah, as well.
I think most Western societies and civilizations, educate their youth in a similar playbook, historically speaking, anyways. I mean, I don't know where the heck they all get it from, but it is
applies to science too.
Yeah. Applies to science too. I mean, actually, here in America, like the private school system's just so it's really large compared to other nations. So we're pretty blessed and fortunate to be able to have, that kind of diversity, because I think private schools are a lot better at presenting both sides of every argument. Yeah, Afghanistan, they don't have public education there. It's just whatever their parents know.
Aren't they homeschooling?
Yeah, I would call it homeschooling. Yeah, it'd be homeschooling. But in Europe, they have a very similar structure that we do, except for it's accelerated. It's a bit accelerated. I think they graduate high school at like 16 or something like that, and then go into a co-op thing where they have a career for a couple of years.
Yeah. The problem is that really it's not about that the school's teaching one school of thought. Is that they're not teaching the kids how to think critically, and that even if they don't teach, even if they don't teach multiple points of view, usually teachers don't even, I guess it's not even in their thought that there might be different interpretations to what they're teaching, because their belief system is also within that framework, right? So the world is way bigger than we ever thought, and I'm learning something new every day that really crushes my old patterns of thought and belief system. So if you're not open to it, you're not really experiencing the world that you should and you deserve, because it's so much bigger and so much better.
Mm-hmm.
And you are so much more capable than you ever believed, because, and that's the fact. And you can go find out, and learn whatever you want.
So how does start that process?
Sorry, go ahead.
How does a person begin that process? I think that that's a really hard thing for people to grasp, for them to admit or to even consider that. Have I been taught things that are wrong? Could things that I learned maybe have been twisted, or how you said, interpreted differently? Like, how does a person, when you say I woke up, both of you, like, what does that mean? And how can somebody begin that journey if they're listening to this and they're like, oh my gosh, she's ringing some bells for me, but I don't really know even where to start, or I don't even know what that would mean. Cause that's really hard for people, I think, who aren't awoken to those questions. They've been kind of that sit down, shut up school type mentality, obey, memorize, and recite, and that's kind of what you know. How do you break out of that matrix, I'll call it, to wake up?
I mean, I didn't start questioning things until I experienced trauma, like a pretty extreme trauma. And I think it was the same for you, right? Or like, I was forced to face some pretty extreme trauma. How about that? Because I think everybody has trauma in their life that they haven't dealt with. And I believe that the beginning to the process that we were just discussing of questioning your reality, which is really important. I think everybody needs to question their reality. But to want to do that and have a drive for it, you have to do a lot of introspection, self-evaluation, really understand the traumas that have happened in your life and how they've shaped you, because that's how our lives are kind of shaped from an early age. Is you come into contact with trauma, it affects you and turns you into the person that you are, and just cascades. But when you turn around and you actually face that trauma, understand how it affected you, at least for me, it caused me to start questioning everything, because like, well, I think a certain way because this event happened to me, and that's the only reason. And it's just kind of silly, really. But it fractures your reality, and calling it a matrix it is great. And it was very similar to how, like, when Neo got pulled out, and he woke up and like threw up everywhere, it's a rough experience. It was a rough time period for us because we were going through it simultaneously, and yeah, it was brutal, but totally worth it. And once you go through it, you get through the valleys and the lows. It's all good news, and you're so happy afterwards because there's so much information out there to consume and discern for yourself what the truth is. And yeah, it's just wonderful. I mean, what's your take on that?
So in my experience, like, yeah, it's very similar to trauma. But for me, I've always been a really curious person, and I like to do research on different things. And when I came to face to face with the, you know, the evidence of human trafficking and child trafficking, and I started reading about pedophilia and all that stuff, it broke me, and I could not even function for a period of time because I
Yeah.
had to admit that that kind of evil exists in this world, and I was just living my life, doing my own thing and oblivious to what's actually going on. There are people who are, it could have been me, because my mom actually told me this story a few years ago that I was kidnapped when I was little. My mom lost me briefly, and she found this woman just taking me by the hand in the market, and she just ran and snatched me, and she just freaked out, and I never knew that story, and I realized that I could have been one of those missing kids, you know, and but what I realized is that when you're face to face is such evil that people can't comprehend it, right? So that's why they're calling people who believe in what's going on conspiracy theorists, and you're just crazy, you're making stuff up. But my but whatever, I don't know. I guess, I mean, hopefully this is a word of encouragement to people that when you find something, just dig deeper. Dig deeper than the loudest noise that you hear, because the loudest voice is not the truth, and you deserve to go past someone else's interpretation of what's going on and find out about yourself. Find out, yourself. And one thing that really helped me is, I mean, for me, that this was paramount to my growth, spiritual growth. So I have to talk about the Bible. So Jamie and I were both pretty much atheists, agnostic. We were kind of we didn't know what we were believing in.
Maybe there's a God. Who knows?
Yeah, like it had nothing to do with us. And Bible is like, a lot of people write Bible off as like some religious book, but it's been time tested over and over, and it's also the bestseller, globally every year. So even if you don't believe in God, there are a lot of answers to the questions that you have, and you don't have to believe in God to read the Bible, and just be open-minded to to the stories and what's being said in the Bible. Don't put on the filter of our modern day thinking. It's really, I don't know. I hope it's like it helps somebody. Like, just be open-minded. I know that's really hard. Said, like, that's easier said than done.
Yeah, I guess try to make a conscious choice to. What did it for me with the Bible is I just decided one day, I'm going to try to look at this, try to look at all the stories in here like they're true. So let's just pretend for a minute that all of this is absolutely true. Okay, so I did that for like a week, and I read the Bible every day, and like it fundamentally changed my life. And now I'm like a extreme believer, happy as can be. I no longer have these crazy depressed swings where I can't like get out of bed anymore. And yeah, so do that.
Yeah.
People.
I think that's so important for every piece of information. Like we were saying, when people see an opposing view, their first idea, like you said, it's really hard to even comprehend. Could that potentially be true? Is there human trafficking? Is China involved? Is there a rigged election? Is it this? Is it that? Instead of even like looking into it, they just say, no, that goes against what I've learned, and I'm not going to cross that boundary. I'm just going to stay in this box. Instead of, what if 1% of that could be true? Maybe I should just go research it. Even if 99% isn't true, I'm still learning something. I'm learning 1% more than what I knew if 1% of that is true, right? Or if there's something I can relate to. I think that's so important for that self-discovery, and for that waking up and leaving the matrix, is being able to say, my box is right here around me, and I'm just going to put one toe out. I'm going to dip my toe in the water outside of this and just see what's outside. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, honestly, like, I mean, I think that what's going on politically is a representation of what's going on spiritually, because these issues are all like very fundamental to our own beliefs and ideologies, and politics is really the outward expression of our spiritual state. And that's why, a lot of Christians say it is a spiritual battle. And, you're not going to convince somebody that Trump is a good guy by listing his accomplishments, because they already have a filter on that Trump is the worst person in the world. They pretty much Hitler, right? And so, but that comes from their own value system. And I think, like, I question this myself all the time. Like, how do we get to that? Because when you wake up from that, living in that manufactured reality, you are better as a person. You're happier. You're more prosperous. Prosperous?
Prosperous. You're more authentic.
More authentic. It's just such a better life, And I think a lot of even conservatives make, and myself included sometimes, like, don't like lose the sight of that, or don't realize how deep this actually is, and get triggered by leftists, and just get involved in like silly quarrels online and arguments online, and at the end of the day, like that doesn't bear any fruit. You know, you didn't, no, you nobody changed their minds. You know. Oh, sorry. So
Right.
yeah.
100%. And then going back to talking about China, because that's also a hot topic here and something that people aren't looking into really. What can you guys offer in regards to that topic? And I mean, you've seen it firsthand coming from Korea. And Jamie, you being from different places in the world that might be influenced by this really big force in the world. Like, what are we actually dealing with here in America that we need to really open up our eyes to and fast?
The one thing that I would like to say about China, and I think um, this is like, I think this is a really good thing to be aware of, is that China is very sneaky. You know, they're not going to do something, you know, like outwardly for us to see. It's like a normalization of them coming in slowly, right? So like just look around you in your house. I mean, the wars are not fought with tanks and fighter jets anymore, right? So wars are fought on economy, um, you know, the fronts of cybersecurity, media, communication, and all that stuff. And look around our house. Can you pick out things that are made in America, or other like things that are made other than, you know, uh, countries other than China? The chances are it's really hard to find, and they have invaded our homes already with their devices and with their products, and we, you know, people don't really think anything of that because you know, you just go to Amazon and buy these things because I need them. Um, but on a deeper level, we have become really uh, dependent on their products, on their manufacturing, you know. And now, like, we're at the point where, like, if we don't have Chinese products, like, can people live? Really, can they get their essential things? You know, because we're so dependent at this point. So, and also, China also brings their ideology, the communist ideology, in the guise of something that will make you feel better and make you feel like you're doing something good for humanity. It's almost like they bring you a box of like it's like a really pretty, like, you know, those like Tiffany boxes, but when you open it and look inside, there's like a giant piece of poop, pretty much. Like that's pretty much communism. They're gonna come to you and entice you with the talks of equality, talks of what else do they do? Pretty much equality. I mean, equality is their main message, but in practice, is never equality for them means nobody having any power and nobody having any money, nobody having any individuality, you know. So um, I think that's one thing that really opened my eyes, that, you know, they're very stealthy. You gotta watch out for their tactics. But the thing is, on the other hand, they're not very creative. So they kind of stick to their plan and their strategy. So it's really easy to kind of spot what CCP is doing all around the world, you know, because they do the same thing in pretty much every country that they are, you know, interfering in.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean they're a huge player in the Pacific theater, obviously. So while I was over there, I said at the beginning that I spent a lot of time training Japanese, Malaysians, Philippines, and the Korean special forces on how to control close air support and just basically how to wage an air war, some kind of air campaign, because you know that theater, there's a lot of ocean, there's not a lot of land. So like the war is going to be waged via naval and air forces whenever it would break out. So all those countries, they're all just terrified, shaking in their shoes of Chinese aggression. China, they've been making man-made islands in the China Sea to increase their reach. They've been setting up like air defense systems there. Um, they've been posturing to try to like take over Taiwan again. Um, the same thing with there's increased tensions with Japan, the Philippines. Um, there's they're just I mean, it's just getting pretty obvious at this point. So I think like your head's buried in the sand if you think there's like China's out for like the betterment of the globe or anything like that.
What are they up for exactly?
So communism has to spread. Like if you are an ideological communist and like that's you believe in it to your soul and you think that it is going to fix humanity and it's the only problem solution for all the depression and all the horrors of human society, then it has to spread everywhere and there can't be any dissenting ideological view. So that's why religion is stomped on really hard with them. That's why they have those Muslim camps right now. They have controlled Christian churches there that are like registered with the state. If you try to worship in your home, or if you try to bring kids under the age of 18 to church, you go to jail. You get immediately imprisoned in China. So things like that, they just quash any kind of ideological view that opposes communism because communism is what's going to fix the world. So it has to spread. So the fact that there's been a communist country, it just means that there's a matter of time before there's some kind of war that's going to happen because the rest of the world is pretty much a democracy. Um,
And
so it should.
what is communism exactly for people who do live in America and who aren't exposed to that or who haven't been taught exactly what that is?
So
People can have more context
communism,
for what you're saying.
Yeah, gotcha.
yeah, so communism in my own description is bringing equality to everyone by taking all their freedoms and all their rights and just making them into these pretty much like robots, dehumanized robots. They say the same thing, they think the same things, they do the same things, and it's all for the greater good, essentially. But it's not really for the greater good, as in other people, my neighbors, my friends, my family. It's for the state.
It's for the party.
It's for the party. Um, I mean, I don't. What is the? I don't know what's the dictionary's
Oh,
definition.
I think
But that's how I see
the
it.
dictionary definition is somewhere. So it's similar to socialism, where the government owns the means of production, as well as the workforce, the military. They own everything. They have control of everything that would run a country. Um,
But I don't think that really conveys the horrors of communism, when you say it like that. Because some people say that, oh, well, government owns everything. Some people actually want that to happen, not realizing what kind of consequences uh, that would become.
And what are consequences that you guys have seen?
So I mean, we're experiencing it right now that all this big tech, doing the bit of their overlords. They're really funny because they participate in the free market and they get all the benefits of the free market. But at the same time, they become the operation arms of the communism ideology. Because right now, like Twitter and Facebook, they're banning people, they're purging people, and all these Amazon, they're getting rid of services like from their AWS and all that stuff. Um, that's pretty like, and I don't know. It really appalls me that like a lot of Americans don't see that as a problem, because they could come for you, and even when you say that, they don't really get it
yeah.
because they are so uh, entrenched with the belief that certain people who think differently, they're all about violence and all about, inciting violence and all that. But it's really a wild imagination to me. Like, they don't have the accurate view of the other people. They are just in fear of what other people may do. Um, I don't know how we got on this tangent. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Oh man, I had it, but
But we're talking about just China as a whole, what their goal is. And
hmm
really just for the sake of what Jamie's explaining about what China is doing to the world in a sense, and how we're kind of stuck in our little bubble here in America and think we're just kind of on our own little island, and we forget that there's this global network thing happening. I just wanted to give a little bit of context to communism just for people here who are, like you said, there's some people who might think, oh, that's fine. The government owns everything. Like, I don't care. Not really understanding like what the actual goal is for our country and for the world.
So I think communism is essentially erasing individuality, right? Like, I mean, we can talk about why it sucks to have government provided services because of bureaucracy and like inefficiency. We can talk about that all day. But at the same time, the core of it all is that we are unique beings, and what they do is they erase you, they erase your personhood, right? And for CCP to succeed, they have to get rid of all the dissenting voices, not even just in China but internationally, because we live in a world where, with the internet, with the help of internet, you can see what's going on. And somebody in China, impoverished in China, they didn't know anything else, and they've been brainwashed to think that their government is the best. For example, like in North Korea, to this day, they believe that we're in the middle of a global war, and the US is actively sanctioning the international aid to make the US the bad guy. And they're getting aid from China. So they're made to think that Chinese is the good guy, right? Um, so stuff like that. And so for communism to really succeed, they're always going to try world domination, um, because the people.
because any because the rest of the world is democratic societies where information is relatively free and this free speech is really prominent, right? And with the internet, and so China controls their internet. They have a firewall access to it, right? But they can't control it all, and they educate they send their population to Western societies to get educated in electronics, all that kind of software stuff. So they figure out how to bypass the firewall, so they get access to that information. They have to limit it as much as possible because they get indoctrinated in their youth to believe that China is everything and communism is the greatest things and sliced bread. And what they get access to truth information and information of a dissenting opinion, and they start questioning their government. Well, communism won't function properly if there's a bunch of dissenting opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So it just
So they have to like crush that before.
So they ultimately want to spread everywhere so that they can control all the information. So they can control how you think and how everybody thinks.
So how are they doing that here? What is happening here in America that a lot of people are just unaware of because we're not, how you said, Rye, like they don't just come out and tell us what they're doing. They do it in ways that are more of an intangible type of manipulation that we're not physically aware. We can't see it happening. So what are they doing?
So you got to follow the money on, especially when you're talking about mainstream media. I believe every single MSM outlet has funding ties to the CCP. Now, I don't have the research pulled up for that, but I'm pretty sure that's true. And also you got to look at our university system. I mean, you went to college, right? You went to school. I mean, how many Chinese professors were there when you went to school, right? There was plenty when I went to school, and it was awful learning from them because of the language barrier. And they consistently talked about consistently talked about communism and how life was in China with us and things like that. Um, and so I mean that's what they do. They use their massive population to be able to, especially in the vulnerabilities here in our with our immigration and our democratic society, to get their influence in our university systems, our school systems, and access to our media systems to control the messaging, and essentially expose the U.S. population to propaganda, and immerse us in it so that we don't even really realize it's happening, because we've all been born into this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's difficult to break yourself away and look from an outsider's perspective. I would encourage anybody who's listening to spend some time trying to live and survive in another country where you're unplugged from Western society for a little bit, because it'll give you an amazing perspective on what's going on here. Yeah, I think that.
Yeah.
You got anything
So
to add?
what do we need to be aware of here in order to, how do we stop this? What needs to happen for people to, I guess, consciously wake up to it? But what do we need to do here in America to permit this from happening in our country?
We got to shine a light on it, and it's got to get exposed. It's the only way it's going to happen.
I think a big part of that is recognizing that how that ideology has penetrated like the very deep fabric of our society. So since your childhood, you go to school and you are, expected to listen to the teacher, listen to the authority, and even it could be as little as, oh, when like what do you want to be when you grow up, and there's only sets of like occupations that kids will say, oh, I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, instead just letting them lead their way and like just be creative and be entrepreneurial. um, so I you know it's that ideology that like communism is really like they're creating a box for you, and you have to mold yourself into it. And it doesn't have to be as extreme as what's going on in China, but it's always, little bit like it progresses little by little, right? And even like we can see that now how compliant people are with the masks, right? And when there is actually science that it is harmful, even more harmful for you, people choose, I guess, fear over, you know, being able to like rationally think, because through our education system and even the media, like that's not something that we get to do. That's not something that we are taught to do. That's not something that we are encouraged to do. So if there are people who are like raising the next generations, or who are um, kind of like seeing the hints of communism popping up everywhere, just believe your intuition, because I think everyone uh, knows in their heart, what's right. We are not to be molded into a box. So I guess that's, yeah. I don't know how to fix that because it's such a prevalent, like huge problem right now. But once I think just to tell people that the world is way bigger than what the media tells us. And it's actually really nice. It's awesome.
Yeah, that's good.
Sorry.
No,
What up?
that was a good sentiment. I wanted to go back to something I had a thought earlier, and it was just like people who are listening, just from like a I guess a militaristic perspective. We here in America, we've coupled ourselves to China. We're locked up like like the train engine is to whatever the next car that's behind it, and we've we've hitched ourselves up to a complete opposite ideology that America's founded on. Right now, China's running around successfully getting control of the majority of the like raw precious metals, um, rare earth metals, all these resources. They're gobbling them up. Right now they're building a lot of relationships with countries in Africa to get access to oil deposits that are there and some other rare earth metals. These rare earth metals, I think I explained to you before, Emma, they're used in all of our smart weapons here in the States. They're used in every single piece of military equipment that we have. They're used in every single piece of electronic gadget that we use to run our society. And right now, China is completely cornering the market. They have over 90% of the supply, and they have 95% of the means of refinement of these metals. Which, as you can imagine, we go into a situation where there's an actual physical war with them. Yeah, I can assure you that the U.S. has stockpiles. We have a lot of it. I can also assure you that the U.S. is the only, other than China, is the only country in the world that can be completely self-sufficient as far as energy is concerned. And I think China would have a very hard time being self-sufficient with energy. I think they rely heavily on oil imports, but they have a lot of coal. But the U.S. has a ton of resources in the ground everywhere. It's just that we don't mine it, we don't refine it, we don't have the means of even doing it anymore because of how catastrophic it is on the environment. The reason why China has been able to corner these markets is because they don't care about environmental impacts and they don't care about their people. Their people who work in these places die at a very young age because they're exposed to very nasty chemicals. In the CCP it's party over people, whereas here in the States it's people over party. At least that's what it was founded on. That's why we're a democratic republic, because the individual is protected from the majority. In China, the individual is sacrificed at the benefit of the majority. So it's complete opposite ideological view, and we have hitched ourselves to them. We've completely coupled ourselves to how our whole society and economy is. Be aware of it. That's about all the message I got.
So I think that goes back to what you guys were saying in the beginning of don't just be aware of what's happening here, like study what's happening in other cultures to be aware of not just kind of what might be coming down the pipeline, but understanding what's happening right now that could be learned, and we can take lessons from how they practiced it in other countries before they've moved those patterns here to America.
Yeah, and I think it's important to look at things from, I think I mentioned this before, from a bird's eye view. So when you're living in America, it's easy to get involved with these issues of racism and all that the media likes to talk about. But if you kind of lift up yourself from there and look at the world, America has its problems and it's imperfect, but it's a great country. It still has the rule of law, and we have the justice system, hopefully, still intact, but more so than any other country in the world. The issue of, I think the worst evil a person can commit is really like anything to do with the child, pedophilia. That is not just, in the States. It's a global thing, and just the fact that it was exposed here, it means that people have the freedom and people have the rights to go after the information they want to find out, and it eventually got found out. And that, I think that really and people were able to, have somebody who also wanted to expose that in office, and that shows a lot, because there are people in Africa and in Asia, these problems, or even Haiti, these problems are so huge, and regular, people don't really have any power whatsoever, and the government is not exposing them because they're part of it. They're part of this global cartel. Um, and I think that it's important to, um, this is mostly, I mean, this is for everyone too, because sometimes we get into this um, idealistic picture of what the world should be and what the states should be. And it's same for leftists and, people on the right, that you have an idea of like what you think that an ideal country should be, and we're always striving towards it, either both ways. But let's agree that it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect, and it's never going to go 100% our way. So we're going to have to come together and look at it from the bird's eye view, and acknowledge that we are all Americans, right? It's America versus China on the surface, but it's America, but in a deeper level, it's freedom versus communism, and that's what it is right now. And right now, they want to, the communism guys want to break up the states, because what is that saying, like nation divided cannot stand. So they want to cause division among us, and that's a tactic. That's a communism tactic. So let's not fall for it, you know. And as much as that riles up people's emotions, look at the fruit of those actions. What's going on? There's reverse racism happening, and with the, I don't know, with the amount of like fighting going on, how, look at how much of a productivity we are losing as a country. We could have had a flying cars by now, but instead people are wasting time on Twitter fighting each other.
That's the truth. Yeah. And I think people need to be a lot more, I don't want to say afraid, because so much of what we're dealing with is built on fear culture, but I feel like we're scared of the wrong things, right? Like you said, people are putting so much fear into, say, wearing a mask, and that's what their focus is on during the day. And they're not afraid of these constitutional amendments kind of being taken from us very slowly, and this infiltration in our country happening very slowly. It's like people get so stuck on these little details, and they're big details. At the end of the day, these things affect our lives. If we have to wear a mask everywhere, like that's something we should be thinking about. But I think people lose sight of the big picture, and they really just start going after these details and bickering with each other, not realizing that at the end of the day, like you said, we are the United States, where we are the most diverse and ideological country in the world, with the most freedoms, the best democracy. And we're sitting here arguing with each other over, how you said, skin color, right? And it's like other countries they're dying to have the rights that we do. They're dying to even get initiated into our country through immigration and by getting a green card. They're sitting there on 5-10 year waiting list to try to accomplish what you were able to, and what so many others have been able to do. And instead, here we are in America, other countries are probably laughing at us at what our problems are, when they're actually dealing with being totally silenced and being beat or put in jail if they think a different way, and having acid thrown on them in the streets. And here we're complaining about, if what skin color is what, and just really silly things that I think we need to really raise our consciousness together as a country, and just as a whole, and really take advantage of these freedoms that we have. Because like you said, so many countries don't even have access to this information. They're not even allowed to go look at a different server that can show them about human trafficking, or about election fraud, or about China. We have all these things at our disposal, and we fight with each other about it, instead of actually being excited, like, oh my gosh, I have the internet, I can go look up all this stuff if I want. Doesn't mean I have to believe it, but like, I have the freedom that I can go online and like actually do research, that other countries, they're just given a book, a textbook, and it's like, this is exactly what you're allowed to believe, and you're not allowed to believe anything outside of this, not allowed to read anything outside of this, right? And I think that that's so important, all those points that you guys touched on, just being more aware and really taking in what this country means, and like not taking it for granted, like being grateful and like exploring all those freedoms and all of our constitutional rights that we have, that other people and other countries would die to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Oh, go ahead, Ben.
I was just gonna say, to bring it back to like what's going on, like literally real time, yesterday, today, with big tech silencing so many dissenting opinions of what their ideological view is, and controlling. It looks like they're trying to control who has access to certain information on the internet, really, which is just straight out of what the CCP does in their own home country. It's exactly what they do. Right now, big tech in the States is a monopoly. It's a monopoly in every Western society because they're hosted here in the United States and controlled by the U.S. government, which they're really not. But they affect every Western civilization, every civilization that has access to the internet. And so they need to be regulated like utilities, and they need to be held to put their feet to the fire to the Constitution, and as written, as the Constitution's written.
I mean, people should be our president of the United States. I don't care if you love him or hate him. If if our president can be censored off all platforms, imagine what they can do to somebody who's not a president,
Yeah.
right? Just some normal person just walking on the streets. Like people are laughing at that and saying, "Oh my gosh, that's so funny. That's hilarious. Ha ha ha. Keep censoring, kicking them off." And it's like people don't realize that they're next. You know, if that can happen to the most powerful man in the world, imagine what they can do to us.
They can effectively delete you
Yeah.
from society
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
100%.
so much of our lives is on the internet now. All of our money is. Yeah, all
They
of
can
that.
dox you in a second, where they find out where you live, where you work. They can find out all your associations and go after them too, all your family members. So, um, I I really don't think that people know what freedom is. People don't know what freedom is.
Here in the States,
So
they really don't know.
no.
I guess they're born into it and they haven't experienced anything else. Um, I saw him somewhere back there. But yeah, I mean, going back to that point, like I really didn't wake up or have a clue till I left the country. I didn't, and I was so driven to do so, and I'm so blessed and thankful to God for driving me to do it. You know, I think he was pushing me down this path the entire time to eventually wake me up. You know, anybody who knew me before 2018, 2017, before that time frame, they don't even recognize me anymore. I went to Vegas for a weekend, like 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, to visit a friend who I haven't seen or talked to since before then. You know, it's only been like 2-3 years, but he was just consistently saying like, "Who are you? Who is this guy? What is going on here?" Because I was just such an angry person before, and you know, these days I'm just a happy-go-lucky guy, father, love my kid, love my wife.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's how you kind of know when you find the truth and freedom. You know, it's not freedom is not given by the government or anyone else. It's within you, really. It's how you view the world. It's all in your mindset. So once you find it, this is how you know your thoughts and your behavior radically change. And if you're believing in something and you're still miserable, you're angry, first of all, like most of all, that's if that's your main um, emotion, then you deserve to find out what the truth is and dig deeper because you're not there yet. And even though the media says, you know, what you believe is true, um, like judge it by your emotions. What kind of emotions does it does it give you? Like, is it a lot of anger and blame and like, you know, onto other people? Then you just know that, like, I mean, you don't have to be emotional about being wrong. You know, you're just not there yet. So just dig deeper into yourself, into these matters, and you'll find it. And you know, I mean, this whole journey has changed us individually, but also like our marriage, you know, how we parent our child, um, our relationships with other people. It has completely changed our world, our reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been
Well, I'm grateful for you both, and God bless you, your son, you both as a couple. I think you both are so inspiring as individuals and especially as a couple, being able to overcome everything that you guys have. I mean, you guys met in another country and made it all the way over here to America and have a beautiful son. And I think it's really amazing that both of you have been through what you have and you have so much awareness of what's going on. And I really appreciate you guys sharing your stories with me and with everybody else that will be listening. How can people keep in touch with you? You guys have social media handles. What are the best ways if people want to ask you more questions or get in touch with you or follow your journeys? Where can they find you?
So I got banned off Twitter. So
I think like 80 million people did.
yeah, I think she did as well. So that's we were most active on there.
We just made a Gab account.
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah.
There's
Gosh, what a
nothing
time.
there, but
Yeah, it's like the worst time to ask about social media because they're purging it, right? We're gonna look back and be like, ah. So Gab, you guys are on Gab?
Yeah, or on Gab. I'm at real Jamison Oldach. Yeah, a little nod to Donald there.
Yeah.
Mine is at set apart for yeah. So set apart FORYAH.
Okay.
In one word.
And I'll link all this in the show notes too for people to see or to get the accurate spellings for it. But is there anything else you guys want to say before we call it a night?
Just Emma, thanks for having us on. This was fun. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you guys too. We'll have to do another one sometime. And I really, really appreciate you guys. I'm grateful for you. And for everybody listening, please join us on the next episode of The Imagination, where everything you think is real. Bye, you guys.